Hi, I'm Alan Day, CEO and founder of State of Flux, and welcome to The Power of Three, a video series where we interview leading Chief Procurement Officers and executives about three things that have influenced their careers. From books to bosses, from music to movies, we explore the three things that have shaped their success. Join us as we learn from the best of the business here on The Power of Three. Hi, thank you for joining us for this first episode of The Power of Three. Today we're thrilled to have Alison Barto join us. Alison's currently the chairwoman of CIPS, amongst other NED roles, and formerly the CPO of HSBC. Alison and I were trying to work out how long we've known each other, and we won't show our age, but it's probably more than 15 years.
A bit more, I think,
yeah. So anyway, welcome, Alison. It's so cool to have you, especially for this first one. I couldn't think of anyone better to have on board.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So the whole point of this is to inspire those coming through the procurement department, or frankly anyone working in a corporate role. I'd love it if you could introduce yourself and in the true Power of Three spirit, if you could talk about three roles you've had and three things you'd like to be known for, please.
Thank you, Alan. And look, a real pleasure to be here. So thank you very much for asking me to join. So I guess I'll come up with three roles, but I am currently, as you said, chair of CIPS. I actually was a trustee for 6 years before moving into the chair role. Very passionate about procurement, which I'll kind of cover as we go through the discussion. But also have evolved into other things. So, done procurement, but also moved on to other roles, which again I will cover. And I think procurement's a good stepping stone to do other things and other things you want to do. So who'd have thought that I've gone on to do trustee and non-executive roles and then chair. So, that's, I think the background of my previous career has helped me move into that role as well. So let me talk about three roles. I'm going to actually talk about my first role, and I call it my first proper job. I don't class kind of working in bars and things like that as proper job, but when I was a student. But my first proper job was I started on what was the British Steel Stainless, which was then Alvester Sheffield, on their graduate training scheme. I'd done an engineering degree and went in on their engineering training course, but actually ended up in procurement. So ended up in their raw materials procurement team, and realised that I absolutely loved it. I had a real passion for it. I loved the negotiations. I loved the meeting the suppliers. I was sourcing, so I went into the special alloys team. So we were sourcing things like titanium and vanadium and molybdenum and all the things you can't pronounce, as well as aluminium and nickel, and hedging nickel warrants off the London Metal Exchange as well on behalf of clients. So it was a really interesting role. I honestly thought I was going to go into engineering and kind of stay in engineering. So to move into something that I was interfacing with externals, I was, reading about commodities and how commodities fluctuated and what was going on with mining and icebergs and northern Russia and things like that. So I just found it absolutely enthralling to be involved in all of these kind of interesting things that were going around the world that impacted the commodities I was buying. And so I decided, and we often talk about falling into procurement, but at that point I took a conscious decision that this was for me. I really wanted to stay in procurement. It was also, you'd be pleased about this, Alan, it was also where I learned about kind of true supplier relationship management. Because when you've got a limited source of mines that you're sourcing from, you needed to build good relationship with those suppliers. So we met suppliers on a regular basis, we built long-term relationships, all the good things around SRM, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and also loved the cutthroat piece of the negotiations as well. So that, negotiating certain contracts, and because there were commodities, in some cases we were 3-month contracts, so they weren't long-term contracts, depending on what the pricing was doing.
You did pretty well in that role. From memory, you got an award as well.
I did.
Memory serves me correctly.
I won something called the Pontifex Award many years ago, which allowed me. It was kind of assisting young talent in the industry, which allowed me actually to travel around Europe and to meet some of our competitors, weirdly enough, but also just to talk about sourcing and building relationships and things like that. So yeah. I completely forgot about that. You have a very good memory. But yeah, so I think that was the role that kind of really got me passionate about procurement. And I decided at that point, it was for me. I said, loved the negotiation piece, really enjoyed all the legal around it as well. I then, during the scheme, I then did my CIPS, so I did my CIPS. So I qualified and actually won an award because I became, at that year, the top student in the country. And on the back of that, Supply Management did an article on me, and HSBC then saw the article and headhunted me. So actually that's how I moved into HSBC. So I guess kind of my next role I would talk about is the Chief Procurement Officer role. So I did a number of different roles in HSBC, and then after a while moved into the CPO role on an acting basis. And very sadly, because David Pritchard, who I worked for, had to take time off for chemotherapy, so I moved in on an acting basis, and then into the role on a permanent basis. So I did 6.5 years in the Chief Procurement Officer role at HSBC. Big team, big international role, spent a lot of time travelling around, which again, I loved. I didn't have a family at the time, so it suited me from a personal perspective as well. I'd already done some time working in Hong Kong, and I'd already done some time working in the US out of Chicago. So international kind of travel never really bothered me, to be fair. And develop the team. When I moved into the Chief Procurement Officer role, David's done a great job of kind of starting to develop the team, but we had three commodity specialists, that was it. And just building a relationship up with our senior execs and getting them to understand what procurement did, elevate the reporting line. So again, it was kind of 3 down from the chief exec. We brought it up a level, and I spent a lot of time with our chief exec at the time and presenting to the board and explaining to them how we could influence the business significantly. It was 15 billion spent, so when you've got a company that's spending 15 billion, it's a significant amount of cost base that you can influence. So did a really good job of kind of explaining to the board what procurement was and how it could influence, and went on to a number of different programs where we saved over $1 billion in spend to cut costs significantly. So that was and loved it. I had a fantastic team behind me. Look, Alan, you and I, many of the team members at the time. You and I have done a lot around strategy. We were talking about at one stage kind of locking ourselves in a small room and talking about strategy and how we could evolve and change that function, which we did a great job of. Yes, the next role is talking. So after I'd done the Chief Procurement Officer role, I guess my option of going, you either stay in procurement and you do a global CPO role somewhere else, or my other option was to stay in HSBC and do something different. And I decided to stay in HSBC and do something different. So after I moved into the trade finance team, but the role I'm going to talk about is actually I moved into managing our regional corporate banking team in the UK, in the north of England. So north of the UK actually, because it was Northern England, Scotland, Northern Ireland. And that was a really interesting role. A team of obviously relationship managers, bankers, working with companies to grow their organisations, helping them with loans and finance, and a lot of the role was working very closely with customers. So I think what was interesting is to go from a procurement role into the corporate banking role. In some cases was actually very similar, and you do a lot of financial due diligence as part of your procurement work on suppliers. We were doing very similar things on customers when we were evaluating them for credit assessments, and building relationship with customers, getting to know their business. So everything we talked about around SRM and knowing your suppliers was exactly the same as knowing your customers from a banking perspective. So, and understanding their needs as a customer, helping them grow their business. And so I think that made me realise that procurement is a fantastic stepping stone if you want to do other things. Because you have a great base of everything from a legal understanding, commercial understanding, dealing with dealing with suppliers or customers. So that external contact that you get is really invaluable when you want to then move into other things. So that role is specifically kind of stuck in my mind around, and I think when I first moved into the team, people were like, oh, here's this woman from procurement, what's she doing here? But when you explain and they understand pretty much everything we'd done from a procurement perspective was very similar to what was going on with how they were dealing with customers. You know, due diligence that you get around your supplier and KYC on your customer, there was a fair amount of similarities around
Pretty
it.
much the same, yeah.
So I think that kind of understanding of you can use your skill, you gain this certain skill set in procurement that you can pick up and you can transfer into lots of other different roles. And look, and I'm saying it now, I guess, as the chair of CIPS, because a lot of that skill set that I've already picked up, you can take and you can move it into other roles and into other professions.
Well, I was going to ask, do you think that's really helped you in your non-exec roles, not just the chair of CIPS, but other non-execs? Is that
absolutely
that would have positioned you really well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think having that understanding, certainly, you know, you get a great understanding of risk and how to manage risk. You get an understanding of strategy, understanding of commercials, and how to read a P&L and a balance sheet. All of that you get within procurement. So all of those skill sets have been, that skill set has been really valuable moving forward.
Excellent. And just very quickly, what would you like to be known for from those roles? What are the kind of 3 traits that you?
I think so. I was the youngest female CPO that HSBC had, so I'd like to think in that way I was a little bit of a trailblazer. I'm probably the youngest chair that CIPS have, so just bringing a bit more kind of a fresher view to some of the roles as well.
Yes.
I'm quite, as you know me, so I'm very down to earth. So I'm originally from the northeast of England, so I'm originally from Newcastle, and even though I've been out of Newcastle a long time, I've never lost my accent. So I'm very down to earth. I say things as they are. You know, I don't feel there's any airs and graces to me. So I'd like to think I'm approachable, so and open. And if people want to come and talk to me, that they feel comfortable coming to talk to me. And then the final thing I would say, look, I've also got a sense of humour. So when things go wrong, and sometimes we just need a bit of a joke and kind of a smile and go, do you know what, that just happens. then actually having a sense of humour at times can help significantly.
Yeah, it was definitely needed in that small room with some larger team members taking up quite a lot of the oxygen.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. Thank you, Alison. So I'm going to kind of put you on the spot and get you to think about some of the things that have influenced your career throughout. So I want to start with 3 books. If you can briefly mention them and why, and then we'll have a quick chat, and then we might move on to some other things from there.
Yeah, and this is one I was trying not to be too serious and make them all kind of work ones, but actually when I look at them, they are a bit, but they're not too serious. So I think my first one, and I kind of use as I said, I've gone into lots of different roles and had to evolve over time. But one that I pull out the drawer pretty much every time I go into a new role is The First 90 Days by Michael Watkins. And it's just a really good book, basic book on kind of when you move into a new role. And I said I pull it out every time I move into a new role, just to refresh on kind of what are the best things to do in the first 3 months. You know, how to establish yourself, how to just create connections. And I've bought the book for lots of people actually, where I've been mentoring them and I've helped them and they've moved into a new role. And the first thing I do is say, right, here's a book for you. It's always the first 90 days. And actually, my husband's got it as well. Yeah. So, I just think that's a really, I call it my kind of Bible. It's a good book to go to just to refresh on. Yeah. You're entering something new. Yes, you have this skill base that's transferable, but you're still entering something new. Remember that. And there are things that you need to do as you move into that new role, just to kind of settle yourself in the first 90 days. That'll help you as a good foundation moving forward.
Yeah. Okay. And your second?
My second is a book I've read more recently. It's called Alive at Work by Dan Cable. I met Dan Cable. So as part of some of the work that HSBC was doing on our kind of digital transformation, a number of their senior execs attended a digital workshop and I say workshop, we did 2 weeks. So,
Yeah.
and through that, just about how to think differently on, what systems can do for you and kind of how it forms your business and how you interact and things like that. So, and one of the guys we met was Dan Cable, who is just, you would love him, Alan. He's full of life, and just a real inspiration. And so he gave me his book. And I've read it, and actually the philosophy, I love the philosophy, going back to was saying about having a sense of humour. You have to enjoy going to work. Look, we all have to work. We all spend so much time at work. So you have to enjoy it. And it's how do you create that atmosphere at work that generates innovation, but generates this energy within people that they really want to be there, as opposed to just rocking up because you're being paid. So that, and Dan goes into that in a lot more detail, and he talks about how kind of industries have evolved, but how we can generate that kind of enthusiasm within our teams in the kind of modern day working environment, that they want to be there and they actually enjoy being at work. I kind of think life's too short. We've all got to work, so why not try and enjoy it as well?
I 100% agree. It's got to be fun, otherwise it's not worth doing.
But he goes into that quite a bit. And then my final book relates back to actually a little bit of when I was in Hong Kong and then in Chicago. So in Hong Kong, I started a bit of yoga. When I moved to Chicago, I got into a little bit around kind of the peacefulness of the mind. And what I hadn't realised was a lot of the Tibetans, when they were exiled out of Tibet, and the Tibetan monks had moved to Chicago. So the Dalai Lama visited on a regular basis. And I can't remember how I got hold of it, but there was an opportunity to do an audience with the Dalai Lama, who I thought, sounds pretty good. So anyway, we went to meet him. It was a fairly small, it was an audience, but it was, I would say, about 100 people, so not huge. To do Q&A with him. And he was just fantastic. And he talked about, trying to keep positive in your mindset and not let negativity set in. And he had one of his answers was a great, and then going back to, he's got a fantastic sense of humour. So one of the questions was, I'm married to my husband who's very negative. And I'm trying to stay positive. What do I do? And the Dalai Lama chuckled and said, I think you should get a divorce. And then he went, no, I'm only joking. No, I'm only joking. He said, he said, you can try and work with them, but you also fill your life with other positive things, so it balances out. And look, so he's been a kind of real inspiration to me. And his book, The Art of Happiness, is a great book. And if there's times where you just feel that things are really getting on top of you, going through certain chapters in the book, just think, you know what, it's really not that important anymore. So so that's been pretty good.
Very good. Okay, and what we'll do is we'll make sure that the titles are available for everyone, so people aren't scratching around trying to find those. But moving on and understanding. So I'll switch it up a bit and ask you a bit about movies.
Okay.
And see, what sort of genres really have kind of floated your boat, so to speak. Yeah.
So my first one, and you'll laugh, my husband always laughs at me, and one of my favourite film is Forrest Gump. And absolutely, it's just a classic. It's full of every emotion that you could possibly want, where you're sitting laughing one minute, you're crying. It's just, it's so innocent in certain ways, yet dark in others. I find it's just I've watched it 100 times. I just find it a really kind of light-hearted movie that you can sit down and really enjoy.
Excellent. And to balance it up, because I'm not going to let you get away with less than 3 here.
No, that's fine.
What are your other two?
Because my next one is more recent and controversial, because I think the second release is better than the first one. So my next one is Top Gun Maverick. And I love Top Gun. I've loved Top Gun for years, but I was thinking they're never going to make a movie that's as good as the first one. But I actually think they did, and I think it's better than the first one. So, and you, Alan, you're aware of kind of my hobbies. So I'm a big Formula One fan. I love speed.
I am.
I love fast cars. So I had fast cars until the point I was pregnant and could no longer fit into my F-type Jag, where I had to hand it over. But so I love cars, love speed. Both my dad's parents were in the RAF. So, and we're based out of Prestwick in Scotland. My dad was brought up in Scotland and Prestwick. So he has always been a massive aeroplane fan. So I remember sitting in the garage with him as a kid doing little airfix planes, trying to glue them together. And we had, there was aeroplanes everywhere. So we had pictures of aeroplanes on the walls, and partly through my grandparents. But so that kind of connection to that speed has always been there. Fantastic. And I think the connection to my grandparents being the RAF has probably made me love the films even more.
Excellent. And number 3?
And then number three is a more recent one, is Bank of Dave. I don't know if you've seen Bank of Dave, but
I don't think so. No,
it's about a guy who starts kind of community lending. It's fairly recent, and it's a true story. And nobody had applied for a banking license in, I don't know, a long time. And Dave decided he would open a bank. So it's have a look. Having been in that banking industry for a long time and known all of the regulations that are now sitting around the finance industry. For him to get there, and I believe the bank is still running as well. So if you haven't seen it, Bank of Dave is a fantastic film.
Excellent. I'll look that one up.
I think it's on there. It's out there anyway.
Okay. Excellent. So switching it up a bit and taking us kind of back into a bit of a work context. And I know if I look at my career, there's been some pretty influential bosses that I've had. Some from a not a positive point of view, but definitely from a learning point of view, and others that have just been unbelievable. So really keen to hear what kind of influences you've had and bosses have played for you.
And you're right. I think your boss and how you interact with your boss is critical. Look, and I think if you get to the point where it's not working, you probably need to accept that and move on at some point. Because I think you need to have, and it doesn't always have to be positive. I think, and I'll come on to my last example where just very honest, and look, I'm very honest and being very open to coaching. But I think they're really important. Really important. And look, my first one, as I mentioned, was David Pritchard, who very sadly passed away of lung cancer years ago, but was the global CPO of HSBC for a long time. And he was just a real inspiration. He was my coach. So he was always very honest with me, and sometimes brutally honest. And mentored me, continued to coach me, helped me with my career. I remember he was the one who said, right, you're going to Hong Kong. And I said, what, I'm going to Hong Kong? And he said, yeah, there is no IT procurement. At the time I was doing IT procurement. There is no IT procurement there. IT are doing all their own contracts, or they're not doing contracts, they're doing all their own negotiations. We probably need to understand and help them. So he was the one who sent me kind of on my travels off to Hong Kong, who said, oh, you'll fix it in 8 months, Alison. 2 years, I was 2.5 years I was in Hong Kong. But he always had faith in me. And as I said, whilst he was brutally honest with me at times to say, what the hell are you doing in certain things, and he would criticize me at times. I remember thinking, but he was just very honest, and he was always right. Look, he was always right. He was a very intelligent man as well. And I think the final bit for me was he was just very brave. So he was getting chemotherapy. He continued. I went into the role on an acting basis. He continued to mentor me and coach me whilst he was getting chemotherapy, right up to pretty much the end. David was there giving me advice on work stuff. And I'm like, David, you've got other things going on. I was like, no, you need to know this, you need to know that. And I've since found out, since he passed away, that what he did was also place individuals in the business just to say, look, she's coming through, kind of developing talent. Can you just keep an eye on her and just help her? So he also
That's pretty
created this
cool, yeah.
network of individuals in the business who were there to support me, even when he wasn't. So he was just, I mean, a real inspiration.
Yes, yeah.
And you know him, Alan. He was a nice look. He was a nice guy as well. He liked a beer and he had a
He was a lovely fella.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he was
So
a lovely
and
guy.
then the next
really
one
nice guy.
is when I then moved to the US. I started working with a guy. My boss at the time is a guy called David Turstig, who is still. I haven't warned him actually. I'm doing this. I will afterwards. He's still working out of Chicago. He's moved into the legal side more into rather than procurement actually. But he again was at times a little bit wacky, but just came up with some fantastic ideas. Was a fantastic coach. He coached his kids baseball and things like that. So he just was used to really kind of working with individuals and helping them develop. And we would often do breakouts where he'd say, right, come into my room, and he would give me kind of a bit of a sermon about certain things around how certain philosophers had done stuff, and just really kind of sometimes a little bit off the wall, but actually absolutely spot on some of these teachings that he gave to all his, it wasn't just me, all of his team. And look, Dave and I are still really good friends now. And I still bounce stuff off him, and he still sends me wacky emails about what's going on and his thoughts around certain things in the world. And he's great. Look, and he, again, fantastic sense of humour. And we've still kept in touch. I said we've both since left HSBC, but still remain good friends.
Yeah.
And then my final boss is a more recent one before I left HSBC, and it's a lady called Jane Galvin, who is now at Santander in the commercial banking, running their commercial banking team, was at HSBC, and she is just a powerball. She really is. She's full of life, just full of energy. Again, look, all three of them have been amazing coaches for me. Very honest. Jane was very honest with me on, my strengths and the areas I need to develop on, and was very keen to help on those areas of development and put me in uncomfortable positions where those areas could be pushed a little bit further. Very honest with her feedback, but also one of the nicest people you'd want to meet. And I think what fascinated me most, so we had a reasonably large team in the corporate banking team in HSBC. She knew most people, their names, their families, their spouses, their relationship situations. We once went into an off-site. There must have been about 200 people at the off-site. When we got to our rooms in the evening, she'd written us all a handwritten card to say, thanks for attending and hope your family's well. And in some cases, she meant the family members, and just she knew her people. So, and I think what was amazing about Jane was, she continues to do this, is she knows her people. She absolutely gets to know her people. And I think that's one of the most critical things you will ever do in any role you take. Look, whether it's in or out procurement. Knowing your team, understanding your team and understanding your people is kind of critical. And she was a great inspiration on how she managed that. And her capacity for understanding people was incredible. It's incredible.
That's awesome. And did you find at any point, one of the things that, I have a very loved former boss that kind of his vision of where I could take my career was more ambitious than mine. And did you find that with the number of, from what you've told me, it sounds that way, but would that be something across all three, really?
Absolutely. So I think the two, David Turstig, yes. Jane, yes, absolutely. But Jane also kind of made you think about what else is out there, to be honest, and made you pushed you into something that could be different that you weren't actually thinking about. Yeah.
Excellent. So I'll move us on from that, and I'm going to ask you about 3 quotes.
Okay.
That you may have come across, and I'll throw one that I like, and it came from my grandfather, which was bite off more than you can chew and then chew like hell. And I kind of like that one. Yeah. So, back to that kind of... So I'm quite keen, just to hear whether you've got 3 quite similar to that sort of thing.
And I think, and it's interesting, this is the one I probably struggled with the most, to be honest. There was one came to mind straight away, and then the other two, probably not so much. I had to go through a few and think, that's good. But the first one that comes to mind, and I'll translate it into something kind of that we all understand, is fortune favours the brave. And it comes back, you say about your grandfather, this comes back actually from my mum and my grandmother. And because I was originally from the northeast of England, in Newcastle, or Geordies as we're known, have a certain dialect. And actually my mum used to say to me, shy bens get nout. Now, what it means is shy children get nothing, which is, and as I said, I translated into a bit of fortune favours the brave. But shy children get nothing. And my mum used to say that to me, you know, she used to push me forward to do things. And my mum and I, and actually I did it, though my mum and I was an Avon lady at 15 years old, you know, going around the local neighbourhood, pushing the brochures through, and my mum made me do it. And she'd be like, the shy bens get nout. You know, the shy children get nothing, sort of, kind of without the Geordie accent. But she's right, you know, and actually, as I've mentored people throughout the years, I won't necessarily say that in the same words, but I'll say to them, you know, if you have to step forward, you have to put yourself forward, you have to have conversations with people that you wouldn't normally go and have a conversation with. You know, I remember being in an event with a chief executive when I went into the CPO role. He knew me, but not that well. So I thought, right, I'm going to go over and have a conversation with him. So I went over and said, hi, you know, I'm now in this role. What do you think? And what do you think I should be doing? And I remember someone saying, I can't believe you've done that. And why not? Why not? You know, so that to me of not being shy, if you don't ask, you don't get. So put yourself out there. What's the worst that can happen? Because someone's going to say, no, you're not getting it. But I think, so that's been a kind of real guiding light and a real philosophy as I've gone forward. And that's come from my mum.
I love it.
Push me forward. The next one is more around life. So if life was predictable, it would cease to be life without flavour. And that's Eleanor Roosevelt. So that's more around life is just full of curveballs. Then you never know what's coming at you. So be prepared for it. Be prepared for change. If life was dull, it wouldn't be life. So
I agree.
Kind of just live in the moment and kind of get on with it. So I think that's a real one for me. I've kind of learned that you just, you know, not overthink. Don't overthink too much. So and life's a wonderful thing, and it is full of flavour.
It's very nice. Yeah. And your third?
And my third, so going back to it, is actually from the Dalai Lama. So remember that sometimes not getting what you want is a wonderful stroke of luck. And there's times where you think you have your life mapped out, and in some cases I've gone for roles and not got them. And actually been quite disappointed, you know, and thinking, oh, I really wanted that job. But actually, you know, another kind of 6 months down the line, realised that that probably happened for a reason. And go back to it was a stroke of luck, because actually what came along next was perfect for me and was more appropriate than the original job that I was originally going for. So when you get knocked back, it's not always a bad thing. In fact, if anything, sometimes it can be a good thing, because it's just not meant to be.
Yeah, perfect. Love it. Right, and my last, just to finish on a bit of an upbeat, my last three things are about music and what music tracks either kind of get you out of your seat and up in the morning. Yeah.
So this one was an easy one. I love music. So I have most of the time I have music, and always music in the car, music in the house. I'm a big music fan. So of all genre actually. So this was more difficult, and I actually had probably about 10 I could have mentioned, and I had to skinny it down to 3. My first one is the track that if I'm feeling a bit down, I will go in the car and I will sing my heart out to, and it's Elbow, One Day Like This, especially the one that's got the London Philharmonic Orchestra in the background, and I absolutely love it. And that's the one I kind of really sing really loud, ideally with nobody around so they don't think you're crazy. But yeah, so that one always kind of lifts the
Yeah.
spirit, I think.
Excellent.
And love it, absolutely love it. I think it's a fantastic song. My next one is, and you will laugh at this, is the Proclaimers, 500 Miles. And it's my husband laughs at me if we go to the gym together. By the way, very rarely do I go to the gym, but when I do get there, and when we get there together, when I've been at the gym, my cool down is always on a treadmill, and I put the treadmill up at a ramp, and I always put this track on, and I stomp around and I sing it, and I would walk 500 miles, and I absolutely love it. It always cheers me up. It always finishes off my workout.
Perfect.
And it's a great one on a dance floor as well.
Yeah. Normally after a few jars, that one comes out.
And then my last one is the one that always gets me on a dance floor, and it's Tina Turner, "Proud Mary," which I love.
Okay.
Tina Turner is
Excellent.
absolutely fantastic. I can't believe she's still going. I have seen her twice actually in concert, and she's fabulous. And the rolling, that's the one that if I'm out with friends, they know that if the track comes on, they're always, "Alison, that's your song. Come on, get up." So yes, that's my one that always gets me on the dance floor.
Excellent. Thank you, Alison. It's been amazing. Now I'm going to do what we do at State of Flux with you, which is finish on 3 things that you've done well and 3 things you'd like to improve, and a bit of advice for our listeners as well, in terms of 3 little pieces of advice.
Yeah, great. So my 3 things I think I've done well, I guess over my career is kind of adapt. So as I said, I've moved from different professions and moved roles, and now obviously kind of gone into a chair role and into non-executives. And I think you have to adapt. You have to take your skill set, but you have to also learn to adapt on there is a skill set probably you still need to tweak. So you're constantly, and actually my next one is evolve, so that you're constantly evolving. Because if you just took your skill set and said, "That's it, right now I've reached a certain age, that's it, I don't need to learn anything else," then actually you would never evolve. So you do have to constantly keep moving and working your brain and evolving. As you move throughout your career into different roles, there's always going to be a set of things that you need to learn. So be prepared to go in and learn those. Be prepared to evolve and kind of move on to the next level within your career without losing the skill set that you've had and you've accrued over the years. So that's kind of adapt, evolve. And then my next one, I'd say bounce back. I would think I'm fairly resilient. And I've had roles, where I absolutely really didn't enjoy them at all. And felt that I wasn't doing a good job and I was kind of spinning a little bit out of control. And so going back to you have to almost say, right, that's just not working. You need to stop, take a kind of deep breath. In some cases, take some time out, and then bounce back, then come back stronger. Excellent. And learn from those experiences. So as you bounce back, you've got to learn from the experience you've been through and think, right, what should I have done better then? How did I handle it? How did I handle my own mental health? And actually I didn't necessarily handle my own mental health well. It wasn't at the forefront of what I was doing. And actually your own mental health should be at the forefront of what you're doing. So therefore, as you come back and you bounce back stronger. So I would say I've kind of bounced back stronger in some cases because I've just learned from some of the experiences. What would I improve? I'd probably improve my listening. I'm a good talker, and look, and that would probably be for the rest of my life. I'd probably get to the point where I need to just sit down and listen to people a bit more, and that means really, truly listening and taking it in and understanding what people are saying, because there's a difference between just listening and nodding and going yeah, as opposed to really kind of digesting what people are telling you and trying to understand what they're telling you. So that kind of continuing to listen and understand people. I'm about to I need to become a better teacher. So as you know, I've got a little boy who's just about to start school. So we've just started phonics and lots of things there. I never thought I'd have to learn, but so I'm actually about to become a better teacher on some. You can appreciate this, having kids. There's times where you need to sit down and help them with their homework, and you just think,
I'm not sure I can help. On that.
So I think understanding, helping helping your kids and being a better teacher. I'm about to head into all of that. And then my last one's just a bit of fun. I need to stop killing plants. I've thrown 3 plants away at the weekend. And I thought they were doing really well, but they're not. They're not going to recover. I need to be more green fingered. So that was just it. That was. I just got. It was at the weekend. I was thinking, why can't I do this? Why have I got everything? I can't. I'm killing everything.
We have that challenge at home here as well, but I won't mention Patrice's name too loudly on killing plants.
So look, and then my advice. So 3 pieces of advice.
Yeah.
And it kind of links back to some of the things I've been talking about previously. First of all, take a chance. Absolutely take a chance. Don't be frightened to take a chance. And this goes back to my kind of shy children get nothing. Take a chance. And look, they're, in most cases, you have nothing to lose. When I took the CPO role, there was a very close friend of mine. I remember saying to a friend of mine, am I too, I was young at the time, I was mid-30s. Am I too young for this role? And she said, what have you got to lose, Alison? And look, and then I absolutely loved the role and said did 6.5 years or 7 years in it. So take a chance. Don't be frightened to take a chance. And yes, you will be nervous, but that's you always progress in your uncomfortable zone. So when you're uncomfortable, that's when you develop the most. So that's, and you only do that by taking a chance. So take a chance. I'd say set yourself a personal annual goal. Because I think it gives you something outside of work to do. So last year I did the Yorkshire Three Peaks. So and just decided that there was a group of us after Christmas said we're a bit unfit. We probably need to do something. Look, and I've done a number of the years. I've trekked the Sahara. I've done other things. So we just said, come on, I've never done the Yorkshire Three Peaks. Let's do the Yorkshire Three Peaks. And it makes you it makes you in an evening or it makes you at weekend get out and walk. And I had a new baby at the time as well, so it was part of my get fit. But I sat down and agreed with my husband. Are you going to could you take him 1 day a week one day at a weekend where I just go and walk? And said, yeah, no problem. So I think set yourself a personal goal, whether that's 5Ks, running, swimming, triathlons. It depends how extreme you want to go. But I think doing that every year just gives you a little bit extra focus, because there is a challenge that you get completely sucked into work. And work can take over your life. Like, and going back to, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but you also have to find a balance for your personal self as well. So every year I try and set a personal goal. I haven't done it yet this year, actually. So, but I will do. I will do, and I think it's probably going to be running this year. We'll see. But set yourself a personal goal. So you've got something else to work to, and it also just makes you a bit fitter, but also gives you something to kind of focus on outside of work. And then my last piece of advice is smile and don't forget to have a laugh, because life can be so serious at times, and the power of smiling at somebody is incredible. So having done a lot of travelling around the world and lived in different places around the world, the one thing that you will find is international language. As you approach somebody, if you smile, 99% of people will smile back. And that just is such an icebreaker and tends to calm people down in a room, or if you're in an awkward situation, then it's amazing. The power of a smile is incredible.
100% agree. Alison, huge thank you. It's been incredibly interesting. I've thoroughly enjoyed chatting to you today, and I know the listeners will get a huge amount out of this. So I can't thank you enough. I'll also thank my team at State of Flux who are going to do all the production behind this. So a big thank you to them as well. We'll look forward to catching up again soon.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll. Look, and thank you, Alan. Thank you for asking me. It's been a replay. It's been good because I've had to sit down and think on certain things, but I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Excellent.